This is Qtv News. I am Mariam Asani and thanks for joining us. Now the main local, international and sports news headlines. A matter of days after the announcement of 90 days of various restrictions, we went out to see how or if they were being observed. The hope of a pledged 1.45 billion euros boost to regenerating the Gambia seems to be fading. In an exclusive interview with QTV, the EU's ambassador told us whether it should be hope or despair. The Minister of Fisheries sheds light on October 2018 deal, which allows EU vessels to fish in our waters. And we hear how heavy rainfall brought destruction and tragedy to a village. In international news, an unexpected windfall for white farmers in Zimbabwe, evicted from land they were farming for decades. The Zimbabwe government announces a $3.5 billion compensation payout bonanza. In sports news, Stephen Tatau, former captain of Cameroon, when they became the first African team to reach the quarterfinals of the World Cup, has died. And much-traveled Senegalese footballer Dame Doye is weighing up his options after turning down the opportunity to extend his second spell with FC Copenhagen. Those were the main headlines, and now the news in details. In local news, following the daily increase in the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the Gambia, the government on Thursday announced the compulsory wearing of face masks, the temporary closure of non-essential public places, and the prohibition of public and social gatherings for 90 days. QTV's Omar Pejala went out and about today to find out whether people are observing the safety regulations and prepared this report.
Eid al-Adha, commonly known as Tobaski in the Gambia, is a day anticipated by Muslims all over the world to commemorate Prophet Ibrahim's willingness to sacrifice his son Ismail at Allah's command, although Allah ultimately provided a ram to sacrifice instead. In the past, that is before COVID-19, on Tobaski Day, Muslims will put on their best clothes and spend time visiting parents, families and friends. In the Gambia, children will often be seen roaming the streets asking for pocket money, locally called salibo, from family and neighbors, which they use to buy ice cream and other goodies. However, this year, the day is celebrated differently as people were compelled to wearing face masks, avoid social gatherings, and stay home due to the novel coronavirus pandemic. As we drove through the Westfield-Brickham Highway, tens of people could be seen standing by the roadside in groups waiting for public transport, most of them without face masks. All the people I spoke to said they were going to visit families and friends, despite the restrictions announced by government.
Waaw dama yakamti won lol motax ma faté ko way always ma ngi amé maximum. Febar bi de dafa nek lo xamné dafa graw. Because suñ la waxé na la defal dara da nga wara ko def because sa bopa ak ñepp. Waaw because lo xamné xam ken xamul dina naka la lay walé dañ ci wara fagaru. Waaw ma ngi ñaax dal suma mbokay da ku nekk dal liñ la sant rek nga def ko. Waaw so mistake mom du ñaaka. Way nak nen ko respect dal because of fever be kay munta understand dal
wo mu to nyalati man sagunda la yamaro mol nyanta no mala inshallah na diata le mbagara me kala dundal
first me bari jogu face mak rek
goddo jonni ma borno okay.
At Latrikunda and elsewhere, non-essential shops were seen open in contravention of the restrictions, and I spoke to some shop owners and asked why they were not observing the government announced restrictions. And this is what they told me.
I'm aware, but these 90 days will affect us. These 90 days will affect us for business because of our shop rent, house rent. It's very difficult for us this time. Sometimes, even last month, I didn't have any money to pay my house rent, my shop rent. I call Nigeria and my brother send money for me to pay my shop rent and my house rent.
This is not the first time such measures have been announced by government, nor is it the first they have been largely ignored. However, the previous announcements of the restrictions has not been helpful in any way in the fight against the spread of the deadly virus, as there was no effective implementation by the authorities. If we are to effectively curb the spread of the virus, we would expect to see a stricter implementation of the restrictions this time around. Reporting for QTV News, I am Omar P. Jallo.
The EU's ambassador to the Gambia has told QTV that the EU and its member states have delivered their pledges to the Gambia from the €1.5 billion pledge, which the EU had mobilized from donor partners at the international conference in Brussels in 2018. The EU ambassador has also urged the government to follow up on the remaining pledges by other states and organizations. Mumudulamin Choi reports.
2 years after the international conference in Brussels ended, with a €1.45 billion pledge to the Gambia from the EU, its member states and other donor partners, only 12% of that has been delivered so far. Of the amounts pledged to the borough government at the Brussels International Conference, about 60% of the €1.45 billion are loans, not grants.
Out of this pledge, the bigger half was a pledge of loans, which, even if concessional, the Gambia was not in position to really take up because of the level of indebtedness of the country. So we are talking about less than 40% of the pledges, which were pledges in the form of grants. I can assure you that all the European Union pledge and European Union member state pledges were made in the form of grants, and they have been delivered to the country.
The Minister of Finance announced last month that nearly $200 million has been delivered of the pledge. The donors at the conference, made up of the EU member states and international organizations, had pledged to support the implementation of the Gambia's National Development Plan.
International conferences of such nature shows that some of the countries or organizations, they might have in the meantime changed their focuses. Nevertheless, we believe that all those pledges were made with very serious intention. Therefore, it is all the more important for the government to follow up on those pledges and implement a very active foreign diplomacy.
Of the €1.45 billion pledge to support the implementation of the National Development Plan in 3 years, the EU had announced at the conference a €140 million grant for the Gambia, which came on top of the €225 million already committed in 2017. The EU's ambassador to the Gambia is asking the government to follow up with vigor the states and organizations that have not kept on their promises.
I was also surprised to read the relatively low level of follow-up on the conference pledges, namely the announcement by the finance minister that only 12% of the pledges have been eventually delivered to the country. Indeed, there is room for improvement in the sense that the state, the Gambia, will have to follow up on those pledges.
The ministerial conference gathered delegations from 43 countries and 10 international organizations, giving the EU a rare opportunity to express its political and financial support to the Gambia, which is undergoing a historic democratic transition. Whether the Gambia is on track towards getting the remaining money of the pledge after 2 years remains uncertain, especially during the coronavirus pandemic, when the world is faced with socio-economic crisis.
I do believe the Gambia still enjoys a very strong support from the international community, and I myself, I am not aware of any indication from any international partners which would suggest that they would not keep their word and would not be ready to deliver their support and keep their promises they made at the pledging conference.
The Gambia continues to enjoy support from the international community, both in terms of loans and grants, which critics have argued have not yet impacted enough on the lives of Gambians. This opportunity, during the early years of President Adama Barrow's government, had raised the expectations of Gambians as the promises were lofty. As to whether they are on track to be kept, that is a bone of contention after more than 3 years of Adama Barrow's government. Mahmoud Lamin Choi, Qtv News.
The Minister of Fisheries and Water Resources has told journalists that the European Union will be paying $15,500,000 annually to fish in our waters. According to the minister, the deal will last for 6 years and has already started. Babu Karsi reports.
The agreement was signed between the Gambia and the EU in October of 2018 under the Protocol of Sustainable Fishing Partnership Agreement. In a recently held press conference, James Gomez told journalists that the EU-Gambia Sustainable Fishing Agreement is not only significant in monetary terms, as part of the deal also involves exchanges for capacity development assistance.
The implementation of the EU-Gambia Sustainable Fisheries Partnership Agreement has started, and the Gambia government has received an amount of $15,500,000 from the EU. This amount is for access and will be paid annually for the 6-year period. The Fisheries Department has also received the amount of $15,500,000, which is equivalent to 275,000 euros for the year 2020. This amount is for sectoral support and will be paid by the EU annually for the duration of the agreement. In pursuance of the implementation protocol of the agreement, a joint committee meeting between the partners as EU and Gambia was held in Banjul for the purpose of developing a work plan to be under the sectoral support, including the preparation of a 6-year matrix for the duration of the agreement, 2020 to 2024.
The deal gives the EU vessels to fish in Gambian waters for 6 years, possibly catching 3,300 tons of tuna and tuna-like species. The vessels are also allowed to fish 750 tons of hagfish per year. According to James Gomez, his ministry is also working on capacity building and construction of boats for the country.
The Minister of Fisheries was able to secure Public Procurement Authority, GPPA, approval for a single source for the procurement of equipment for training fisheries staff as well as National Navy staff. The contract between the Minister of Fisheries and CLS has been prepared and be vetted by the Ministry of Justice prior to signature. Construction of 14 boats is almost completed and will soon be handed over to the Department of Fisheries. The boats are to be used as follows: 2 boats to be allocated for training of Gambian entrants into the fisheries sector and become fully fledged fishermen, particularly the young people. 2 boats will be allocated for monitoring of activities against illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing along the coastal and inland areas.
Stakeholders and experts have criticized the deal on the grounds that it poses risks to the Gambia, whose monitoring and surveillance mechanisms are too weak to adequately check the activities of EU's 41 vessels at sea should they go beyond the authorized species as indicated in the agreement. In addition, it raises questions about what the impact will be on locally available fish stocks. Babukar Si, QTV News.
We will go for a short commercial break, and when we come back, the news continues with local, international sports news. Do stay tuned.
Waa jàng yaa ngi nice de xanaa da ngaa génn
déedéet jonge si saal jonge si waañ maa ngi tooga
sa xarit moto yi ak sanse bii nga xamante mën na ma jaaxle suma ndijaay ak xaritam yaa war a ñëw añ si tey te maa ngi nii suma moto yi kër yi ñëpp a tooy xaw ma nu maa def
man du may toogee mata léegi Oryx gas lay toogee wóor na gaaw na yomb na tey doo si tilim ñaar laa si jënd nag xaaral ma abal la benn ndax nga bañ a naaja
Oryx gas moog ñun ba faw. Oryx gas mun nga ko am si bépp Atlas station si biir réew mi.
Na nga dem na mën naa la de.
Waa Fatima.
Waaw.
Kii laa fi ñëwoon ngénte.
Moom la.
Waa Fatima yow lan mooy sa secret.
Ci lan.
Damaa gis yow daal ak dëgg yàlla sa xale moom dafay rafet macha allah.
Cri du dara du afresco.
Afresco.
Waaw lii mooy afresco. Lekki xale la serelak la mboq lañ ko liggéeyee sa doom su koy lekk dina healthy dina sawar 100% vitamine la am.
Afresco. Ay ma ko soxlaa fan laa ko mën a amee.
Yomb na bépp bitik boo dem marché wala supermarket mu fa wala nga daagu ba Bartes Serekunda nga jëndee ko fa mun ngaa dem tamit seen maakaan bu mag ba fële sa Banjul Liman Street bi nga am afresco mun nga leen call si 777-2398 wala 223-5801 wala 739-3301 afresco mooy lekki xale bi gën.
Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, this is QTV News. A heavy downpour of rain on Wednesday night destroyed the newly constructed bridge in Kumbija village and claimed the life of one woman. Alhaji A.F. Jallo reports.
A heavy downpour of rain on Wednesday night destroyed the newly constructed bridge in Kumbija village and claimed the life of a woman. Disasters are inevitable, but some are man-made. On Wednesday night in Kumbija village, Fuladu East District URR, the effect of rainfall was a terrible nightmare for the residents. The heavy rainfall, which began at around 9 p.m., lasted for approximately hours. The pressure and the velocity of the flood caused by the downpour meant the newly constructed bridge could not contain the resultant water, thereby destroying the multi-million-dollar bridge. In doing so, it claimed the life of a lady who, according to eyewitnesses, was struggling and calling for help at the top of her voice in a commercial taxi which was being swept away by the flood water. At the scene, we spoke to a visible angry alkali who angrily stated that this disaster could have been averted if the waterway was not blocked by the poor design by the contractor whom they claim wasted government resources. Mr. Jawara called the bridge a white elephant project which was implemented without the prior notice of the Village Development Committee and local authorities. What happened here? Our difficulties in Kumbija. Yesterday, around 2200 hours, the heavy downpour of rain washed away a taxi which claimed the life of a woman. This was caused by the poor construction of the bridge. The contractor never consulted the VDC and our local authorities. This was why this incident happened. The VDC representative, Mr. Musa Jawara, said government contracted the bridge to the national road authorities, but he too called it a complete waste of resources and not value for money. He therefore called on government to swiftly respond to remedy the situation. If not, their community will be cut off. Such disasters had never happened in our community. The White Elephant Project created all these disasters because the waterway was blocked, and therefore he advises the contractor to work with the villagers, but it was not paid heed. As a result, it is a complete waste of resources. Government has spent over $11 million in constructing this bridge. The bridge we had there before is far better than this particular bridge that is there, which was contracted by the National Road Authority. So we are so disappointed with what has happened. Abu Sisoho, a youth leader in the village, has this to say.
We, the old villagers, came out. When we heard the passers-by shouting for help, crying for help. No one to come out. So the construction of the bridge is very, very poor. You understand? Water overflowed the bridge that was constructed. As you can see, this is our old bridge constructed by the community. This is the bridge constructed by the contractor, but the work is very, very poor.
Calamities are a great misfortune or disasters. In Kumbija village, dwellers claim that such disasters never strike their community, which destroyed banana plantations and vegetable gardens belonging to their women, whose source of living is wholly dependent on agriculture. Reporting for QTV News, I am Alaji Eb.
In international news, a move that has taken many by surprise. Zimbabwe is set to compensate white farmers who were evicted during the land reforms in 2000s. As Jaina Basonko reports, each of the 3,500 people who applied for compensation and is eligible will receive almost $1 million. Jaina Basonko has more.
The government of Zimbabwe and the Commercial Farmers Union has signed a $3.5 billion deal following protracted negotiations to compensate white farmers who were kicked off land they were farming. The land seizures began in the 2000s by the government of Zimbabwe under the leadership of Robert Mugabe, and thousands of white farmers were forced to leave their farms under a government land reform program. Almost 4,500 white-owned properties and others protected under government-to-government agreements were affected by the program. An agricultural industry that exported tobacco and roses grew most of the food the nation needed collapsed. Periodic food shortages started and inflation kicked in. One of Africa's richest countries became one of its poorest within a few years. Zimbabwe lost a lot of international trust 2 decades ago after implementing the land reforms, which sometimes resulted in violent evictions. The US and European Union implemented sanctions in response to the brutal land reform, targeting numerous Zimbabwean companies and individuals. Some of these sanctions are still in place. The move to compensate whites who are in the first place had acquired land that did not belong to them has not been met with universal approval. Farmer Bolwin Manzango said in an interview with BBC that his forefathers will need to be compensated because they were removed from where they gained their livelihoods. The bad effects of the land reforms are still in existence, as the lands taken at a time are still government-owned and farmers only lease their fields, which makes them lack assets that they can use as security for bank loans. Many African analysts believe that actions against Zimbabwe would not have been taken had the farmers stripped off their land all been black. Some in Zimbabwe are also claiming that the billions being paid to white farmers would have helped black farmers succeed if given to them as loans or grants. For the Zimbabwe government, they hope it is a one step in enabling the country to come in from the political coal. Reporting for QTV News, I am Jenna Basonko.
And now, here is the sports news. Cameroon legend Stephen Tatau passed away on Friday in Yaoundé after a short illness. The Cameroon Football Federation has confirmed. Tatau was the Cameroon captain when the team made the last 8 at the World Cup in Italy 30 years ago. The first African team to reach that far. Babukar C tells us more.
Without doubt, he is one of the greatest Cameroonian players of all time. Until his death, Tatau was on the staff of the Technical Directorate of FECAFOOT, Cameroon football's governing body. One of his last public appearances was during the official draw of the final tournament of the Total African Nations Championship CHAN Cameroon 2020 held on 17 February 2020 in Yaoundé, where he assisted compatriot and national team player Solomon Olembe to conduct the draw. Tatau was the captain of the famous class of 1990 that made global headlines at the 1990 FIFA World Cup in Italy before painfully crashing out at the quarterfinals to England thanks to 2 Gary Lineker's penalties. This was the farthest any African team had made it at the time. That was the first time an African team had reached the last 8 in the knockout stage, with Cameroon achieving memorable wins over defending champions Argentina, captained by Diego Maradona, Romania and Colombia, before losing 3-2 to England. Federation President Sidou Mbombo Njoya wrote on Twitter, "It was with great emotion that I learned of the death of the former captain of the Indomitable Lions, Stephen Tatau. He leaves the memory of a great sportsman and a remarkable leader of men. All my condolences to his family and loved ones." The right back also captained the Lions at the 1994 FIFA World Cup in the USA, where they failed to repeat the heroics of 4 years earlier and were knocked out in the group stage. The highlight of his career was winning the African Cup of Nations in 1988 in Morocco. He played for local clubs Tonnerre Yaoundé and Olympique Marseille before joining Tuzu Future in 1995, becoming the first African to play in Japan. Defender Tatau won 43 caps for Cameroon. To the rest of the world, he will forever be remembered as the man who led the team that opened their eyes to the true potential of African football. His place in history is secured. Babukar C, QTV News.
Kobe Haven manager Steele Solbakken has praised Dam Ndoye as one of the greatest players ever to have played for the club. The Senegal international ended his second stint with the side after failing to reach an agreement on a new contract. More in this report from Babukar C.
Ndoye, now 35 years old, has represented the Lions in 2 separate stints. He has played 218 games and boasts 118 goals for the club. In the past year, however, he has been hit by serious injuries, limiting his playing time. Solbakken has praised the contribution of the former Lokomotiv Moscow striker to Copenhagen and explained how the club made frantic efforts to tie him to a new contract. Ndoye is without a doubt the best striker in the history of the club and the Superliga, and he writes himself in the history books as one of the greatest ever at FCK. There can be no 2 opinions about that, says manager Ståle Solbakken. We also had a desire to keep him in the club for another year despite his serious injuries, but he has declined the offer of the contract extension we had presented. We offered both a short-term deal so he could play against Besiktas and also an extension until next summer. Ndoi returned to FC Copenhagen as a free agent in July of 2018 on a one-year contract. 27 days later, in a match against Yalbok, which finished 4-0, he scored a hat-trick in just 15 minutes to become the club's all-time scorer, surpassing the Brazilian Cesar Santin. Ndoi, who has 26 caps for Senegal, made his Senegal debut in November of 2010 in a 2-1 friendly win against Gabon. He was part of the squad that competed in the 2012 Africa Cup of Nations, scoring as a substitute in a 2-1 loss against Zambia. He has previously featured for Panathinaikos in Greece, Lokomotiv Moscow in Russia, and Hull City in England, among others. The much-travelled player's next move is not confirmed yet, but rumours has it that he might be interested playing in either the Australian or Japanese league. Babukar C, Qtv News.
Before we end this bulletin, let's take a quick look at our main stories. A matter of days after the announcement of 90 days of various restrictions, we went out to see how or if they were being observed. The hope of a pledged 1.45 billion euros boost to regenerating the Gambia seems to be fading. In an exclusive interview with QTV, the EU's ambassador told us whether it should be hope or despair. The Minister of Fisheries has shed light on the October 2018 deal, which allows EU vessels to fish in our waters. And we heard how heavy rainfall brought destruction and tragedy to our village. In international news, an unexpected windfall for white farmers in Zimbabwe, evicted from land they were farming for decades. The Zimbabwe government announces a 3.5 billion compensation payout bonanza. In sports news, Stephen Tetau, former captain of Cameroon, when they became the first African team to reach the quarterfinals of the World Cup, has died. And a much-travelled Senegalese footballer, Dam Ndoye, is weighing up his options after turning down the opportunity to extend his second spell with FC Copenhagen. That's all we have for you in this bulletin. Thanks for watching.